Hi, this is Sam Ghods, CEO of Connected, and you're listening to Professionally Cannabis.
Where do they go, the smoke rings I blow each night? Oh,
Hello,
what
listener,
do they
and
do,
welcome back
those
to another
sparkle
episode of
buds?
Professionally Cannabis. The more Sherlock Holmesy minded amongst you may have noticed that a couple of our episodes lacked introductions over the preceding weeks. Now, while we always want to give you that personal touch and introduce our guests, there was a very good reason why we didn't find the time to come together on this, and that's because Jonathan has a separate project to the podcast. I know I'm heartbroken, but he does have other interests. And this interest of his is called GCI. So, for those who might not know about GCI, Jonathan, could you tell our listener why we had to forsake certain intros over the past couple of weeks and what benefit they can get out of that well-used, otherwise used time?
Yes, absolutely. And Oscar, appreciate the opportunity to letting me throw in just a tiny little plug here, and a rare one that is. But yes, at GCI, we run an event for senior leaders in both cannabis and psychedelics. And listener, the reason why we haven't been able to record our usual intros and outros as normal is because, well, that's not great grammar. It has been because I have just been busily preparing for the event. Now, what does the event look like? At the summit, we have a variety of specialized conferences with sessions within them that focus on different parts of the industry's value chain, from research and science to medicine and patients, regulations and international markets, all the way through to cultivation, operations and technology, consumer brands and retail, investment and finance, and finally psychedelics. We have been prepping tirelessly for the event, and if you are a senior leader that operates in either cannabis or psychedelics, we'd love to see you there. I'll keep this plug nice and short because I find it kind of awkward to do these plugs anyway.
I'll help you then. This plug is the greatest plug because this conference will be the greatest conference. And you haven't mentioned the best part, which is that interested parties can register for free, or that there's a tiered system, so there's networking level, but people who just maintain an interest but don't want to network can join for free. Is that right?
Yeah, that is actually right. And actually, everybody can get involved in the network. We want to make sure that senior leaders across both cannabis and psychedelics are able to network and collaborate with one another, and leaders from across the world with, global pandemics, not barriers to sort of making those connections. So if the conference, the event, the summit sounds like it's something for you, you can register your place directly on the website, or apply for a ticket directly on the website, may I say, and you can hit that up on www.gcivirtualsummit.com. That's www.gcivirtualsummit.com. Plugs aside, Oscar, who did we have on the podcast today? A very interesting episode it was.
Yes, we had Sam from Connected. And I think maybe we're trying our listeners' patience by going on so long without rolling into the intro. So, shall we get to it?
Yes, absolutely. Let's roll into it now.
Where do they go, the smoke rings I blow each night? Oh, what
Ladies and
do
gentlemen,
they do,
I'm very
those
proud to introduce to the podcast audience today the CEO of Connected Cannabis, Sam Ghods. Now, Connected Cannabis is well known as a vertically integrated cannabis operation coming out of California, concentrating on designer weed. They acquired Alien Labs 2 years ago, and their strains, Gelato 41, Gelonade, Lemon Tree, too many to mention, are real favorites across the board and command a commensurately high price. So, Sam, welcome to the pod.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Excited to be here.
So, Sam, as you'll know as a listener, the question that we ask to all of our guests on the pod, and that is, what led you to the plant?
Yeah. So I originally came from the tech industry. in terms of kind of like my career and my background. So I started a company called Box with me and 3 other friends back in the mid 2000s. We grew that from the 4 of us over the course of a decade plus to thousands of employees worldwide. Ultimately went public in the US in 2015. And I led that primarily on the technology side of technology. And around 2017, 2018, took some time off, decided I kind of wanted to explore, think about doing something else. Looked at a bunch of different spaces and industries, obviously started in tech, as was my background. But as time went on, I kind of branched out further and further. And I always had a really strong personal passion for really craft and premium consumer goods. So for me, that was things like wine, spirits, coffee, chocolate. I just love nerding out on really kind of high end products where people have poured in a tremendous amount of time and energy to create something that's a really unique and special experience. And I just love, learning about and discovering how these products are made. I'm always the most annoying person in any wine tour where I just won't stop asking questions, about the process or how it's made or how they make different decisions or, where the grapes come from and all this stuff. So I've always loved that personally. Didn't think I would end up there professionally, but as I was exploring different industries and companies, I found through some mutual friends, Connected, which is the largest branded flower company in California, I like to say within the first 30 seconds of meeting the founder, who I met, who's Caleb Counts, who I met in mid 2018, July 2018, I was completely sold when he told me that for years they had been selling out of their product of their flower on the order of tens of millions of dollars a year at more than 2 to 3 times what everybody else was selling for. So that immediately piqued my interest. And I was like, I personally, to that point, did not know cannabis could be like that. I didn't know it could be like this premium, high-end, in fact, quite sophisticated consumer good. So I wanted to learn more. And they were looking to expand the business, to grow, to raise capital, to eventually go public. And so it was a really good fit in terms of, potential skill set. So I started spending time with Caleb, the company, the team. I just started drinking from a fire hose in terms of this industry is so interesting. It's so complicated. There's so much potential. There's so much, regulatory complexities, growth potential. Like there's just a lot going on. It really felt like the internet. It continues to feel like the internet in the early days. So I, dove in, spent a couple months with them advising, and then in September of 2018, they were looking for a CEO. Joined on full time as CEO, and I really have been partnering with Caleb ever since.
So you mentioned just before that it felt like the internet in its early days. Now that you have your feet firmly under the desk and are very familiar and accustomed with the industry, does it still feel like the early days of the internet to you, or has this industry taken a different shape that you've been a part of growing into?
No, it totally still does. 100%. In fact, maybe more so than ever. The growth potential due to some, pretty significant headwinds, like both regulation and the continued, in the U.S. federal, lack of federal, legalization. Because of in large part because of those two factors, I think there are some still major headwinds that's really limiting the potential growth of the space, and so it's moving along a lot slower than it will be otherwise. But the growth potential is absolutely there. I think the estimates of 150 billion a year in annual revenue are conservative at this point, in terms of when we'll hit that. And there is a lot of potential for this plant to do a lot of good for the world, to be one of the most incredible and finest forms of recreation we've ever seen.
And keeping on the internet analogy, does that mean that we are in store at some point in the future for the cannabis equivalent of the .com crash, or is that something that we've already seen in the 2019 market dip / correction?
I think these growth markets tend to have ebbs and flows. I do think there was a pretty big crash, yes, and correction in 2019. I think that may happen, a couple more times to various degrees of severity. But it's not really relevant to the dynamics. Companies continued to keep growing through that period. And some of the greatest companies in the internet emerged out of that, right? Amazon, Google, several others. So I think, I think that's possible, but not really relevant to like the long-term growth, just as it wasn't in the internet.
And we've talked about growth a few times already. I'm just trying to wrap my head around, if you've got the best premium brand in the biggest legal market in the world and your price is 2 times everyone else's, how do you grow? What is there to grow? The market as a whole? Wait for regulations to change? I assume you're not betting the farm on edibles or other new product types.
Yeah, I mean, I think on every dimension there's room to grow. So one, in California, we are currently the biggest, but there's plenty more consumers to reach. 2, in other states, and we want to eventually reach other countries as well. So we want to keep growing into different markets all over the world, and bringing the products that we make, the plant that we cultivate, to be able to reach consumers and show them what truly premium cannabis is. And then 3rd, we think there's still growth, even not just through other SKUs, but even in flower. The potential of this plant is tremendous. We are still in the very early days of understanding how to cultivate this plant at a very high level. We believe we've invested the most and are probably furthest ahead in the world in doing that, but we are still at the very beginning. A lot of people don't really realize that because of the worldwide prohibition for many, many decades, basically throughout the entire 1900s, of cannabis, the incredibly strict prohibition that was put into place for a plant and product that is often medicinal, has far fewer societal consequences than many other forms of recreation. Because of that prohibition, the understanding of the plant, the research, the knowledge of it is frozen back when in the early 1900s of science. So it hasn't had the benefit of years of university research like we have had for virtually every other crop we grow. On the same token, to further kind of reinforce that, cannabis is more complicated to grow than the vast majority, if not every other commercial crop we currently grow. It is a much more complicated plant. There are different metabolisms at play. There's everything from the kind of look and smell and flavor and the nug structure and the way that it smokes, all the way through to the way the terpenes and the cannabinoids affect you, and the way it affects the experience and how that affects each individual person. We know very little about this plant, so that's a big area of focus for us. We've begun investing in kind of a more science and R&D angle, and we're going to continue to do so, and try and really push the cutting edge of how this plant is grown and consumed.
And looking at your consumers, I'm sure there are listeners around the world who have an idea of a quote-unquote typical California consumer. But I imagine that when you actually have your feet on the ground in California, there are many different segments of consumers within the state. Now, looking at that, what would you say are the sort of the core segments or the core target audience of consumers in California that really fit lock and key with Connected Cannabis?
I think we have a pretty diverse audience today. Certainly people who've been consuming for some time and have a good sense of taste and what they're looking for, are a huge portion of our base. But we also really appeal to anyone who wants to try out the plant at its highest level and highest potential. We kind of are able to provide a more consistent experience with flower than you're able to get anywhere else. If you get an eighth of Gelinade or Gushers or on the Alien Labs side, Baklava or Area 41, if you get one of those eighths from us, then that you're gonna have a great and consistent experience every time. So we really appeal across the board, and a lot of the spread of the product just comes from word of mouth. I mean, for a lot of people who are getting into the space or starting to consume more or experiment with different brands and products, they'll just ask, people they know who have been consuming historically. Most of the time our brands or products will come up first.
And let's talk a bit about finding consumers then, because I think you're probably one of the largest, if not the largest, brand on Instagram, which I assume gets many people interested in the product. And you've also recently brought on, and forgive me if I've got this slightly wrong, Craig Lyon from Nike to be your head of marketing. So you must be cooking up some sort of plan there. How is marketing on Instagram anyway? Is that even allowed by Zuckerberg? Does he give you grief? How does it work?
Yeah, so you can't do any paid online advertising of any kind in cannabis. So you can't do AdWords, you can't do Instagram paid ads, you can't do Facebook paid ads. So there's no performance marketing, which means you really have to live and die by the strength of your product. So we have amassed one of the largest followings on Instagram entirely through organic reach and sharing and word of mouth and all that. So we're really proud of that. And you can see our engagement, online with our customers is through the roof. I mean, we're top tier across premium brands across all industries in terms of the number of likes and comments we're getting per post. And if you go look at our Instagram, it's connected.california and Alien Labs. If you go look at those handles, you'll see why. The way the quality of our flower and the way we present it is, I think, second to none and just captivating. And it really is emblematic of how we do things. So that's how we've grown our kind of online marketing presence. I think it's been 95% on the back of the strength of the genetics and the strength of the cultivation. And now, as you mentioned, we've brought on Craig, who ran brand for Nike global basketball for years. He is, working with our team to kind of supercharge our efforts on the experience side. And so we've got some things cooking up that I'm very excited about, but can't talk about yet on kind of the customer experience where we can really be top tier across the board in terms of, kind of a consumer brand in general.
While we're on the topic of the team at Connected, I'm kind of interested to hear, okay, so one, how does someone who comes from a tech background, not necessarily a cannabis background, get on and work so well with a founder who's got a legacy background, who must be so deep into it that it almost feels like you must be very green behind the ears for it? And then perhaps more broadly, what's the team like at Connected? What makes it work? And how are you going to expand in the future or when you go into other states?
Yeah, great question. And one that I think is asked too rarely in this space. For sure, the kind of cannabis world and I'd say the broader business world have evolved independently for decades out of just, again, this artificial categorization of this plant by our society. And again, I think in a way that we all feel has been unjust and unwarranted. So as a result, I mean, honestly, a lot of people ask about this question kind of indirectly also through our competitive, lens of, what other companies are out there. And I think the two questions dovetail because I think most cannabis companies out there fall into one of two buckets. Either they've been around for years, they may have developed product market fit, they may have this product, that's good quality that people, enjoy and have a lot of appreciation for, but they historically have had, haven't been able to recruit talent that's been able to take them to the next level. They haven't been able to scale to build a capital structure that allows them to fundraise and eventually go public. So they really struggle going to that next level. On the flip side, there's a lot of companies, the newer companies, the ones that have gone public, the larger scale ones, the ones, many of them measured in, multi-billion market cap, that have the business acumen and the talent and the team. They may be coming from finance or real estate or traditional consumer goods, but are completely devoid of talent on the cannabis side, and generally have products that nobody really cares about. They may be selling well in certain markets because there's artificial, regulatory regimes that enable that. But there's no product that has any hype or excitement or real quality behind it. And those two companies generally have a hard time attracting the other category of talent because of kind of what you hinted at, which is that they're two very different worlds. It's hard for the cannabis folks to, develop respect and appreciation for the business people. It's really hard for the business people to come in and appreciate what the cannabis people bring to the table. It's two very different cultures. So at Connected, from the very first day, Caleb and Maya's partnership was a huge focus of what we were building. And we have spent hundreds of hours developing our relationship and an appreciation for each other's talents, perspectives, experience, background. And we've built that throughout the entire company. So we really focus at, virtually every level, bringing people from traditional industries, whether it's scale or consumer goods or tech, and combining them throughout with people who've spent years in this space and understand this space. It is a really, really complicated space. It is not hard seltzer. It is not energy drinks. It is not like yet another consumer good category. It is a massive, complicated category with hundreds and hundreds of kinds of products entirely of its own. And so understanding the dynamics, how things work, what the right strategy is, how to deliver the best product to the consumer again and again is incredibly non-trivial. And I think you see it over and over again with companies that start with, kind of traditional management teams who don't have a good core cannabis experience base in their leadership teams, running into the same problems, which is really hard time creating products that actually resonate with people. So it's been a huge focus from us from the very beginning. It's the reason, it's Caleb's had the genius and foresight to bring on someone with my kind of background, not because I'm so great, but just because it's something that's different, and to bring in that diversity, and not just sticking with what he knew. And so, and we've worked really hard in our relationship. And yeah,
well, it sounds like your problem was the opposite, right? Because you had a great product, but it was selling out every year. So you were brought on as a way to perhaps work out how to scale it. Is that right?
Yeah, how to scale it, and also to expand beyond California. So we expanded to Arizona, first new state for us. And as many people know, you can't take product across state lines in the U.S. It's very hard you can't export globally in the US. So when you're in California, you're stuck in California. That means if you want to open in any other market and start to scale beyond just the one market, which isn't an enormous market that has a lot of potential, but we still need to be, geographically more distributed if we want to scale. That was a huge operational challenge. And you need the right team, company, access to resources, fundraising. You need all these things to be able to rebuild your operations in a new state. So yeah, there were a lot of things coming, and I think it's one of the reasons why we're starting to scale, where a lot of California companies are kind of staying put to some extent.
And would you be able to give us a little bit of a flavor of the operational work that does go into expanding across states and into new states? I know there'll be a lot of single state operators listening to this podcast that will be thinking about their own future expansions. Sort of what goes into it? What's sort of the core checklist that you need to make sure you're doing to do it right? And are there do you have any war stories and things that you wish someone like you would have told you before you embarked on this?
Yeah, it depends a lot on your strategy. So for some products, it's far more challenging than others. For example, if you're making an edible, much of your process can be potentially replicated very easily. Like the raw, kind of THC-oriented material you need may simply be distillate, which is, relatively easier to access than in many states. Then, for example, for us, where we're growing, flower in a very specific way at the highest end of the spectrum. So, it depends a lot on what your requirements are. You also, for some products, you may be able to have a recipe that is, as long as you followed it, it's relatively easy to replicate across multiple states. Working with other partners and leveraging their infrastructure. And then, potentially putting your brand on it and taking a royalty on it. And so that's a simpler way, an easier way to expand your brand. But on the flip side, if you're probably, for us, it was always a total non-starter for us to simply put our label on someone else's product. We felt and continue to feel very strongly that if we're going to launch in another state, it should be our product that our team makes with our genetics, our SOPs, our processes. And so we've, been much more deliberate and methodical about expanding than I think many of our competitors that have expanded. So, the best advice I can give is really think through what pieces are important, what's replicatable, what can you train someone else on, what do you need to own on your own? And that's going to dictate both the capital requirements and the speed. So if you can simplify things down and produce, a product that is fairly, generic or simple across different markets, you're going to be able to expand your brand a lot faster, and you should make the efforts to do so. But, if you have a very high-end product, my recommendation would be you might see some of your competitors passing you by, but if you believe product is important, if the thing you make is what your brand stands for, then I would encourage, anyone to take your time and look for the right opportunities in new states and build for the long term. Our one of our focus and visions is we're really not trying to flip the company, sell to the highest bidder, merge, or sell the company into one of the MSOs, anything like that. We think the opportunity here is to build independent, generational companies in this space.
And what's your personal relationship with cannabis or the products that are put out? I mean, it's well known that, for instance, Alien Labs typically sweeps the cannabis cups, and generally the strains in your brand house are all very well regarded. Is that something that you personally connect with, or do you have other people in the organization who tell you, yo man, this shit is fire, this is what we need to push next?
A little of both. I would say, personally, I mean, I love the plant. I love everything we're doing with it. I nerd out and geek out just as hard as anybody else on it. However, I know enough to know that I'm still very green, if you will, to the space.
No pun intended.
Yeah. So I'm very happy to defer, on expert judgment of the actual, like, I'm not selecting phenotypes personally. That's not my role, and I'm very happy to embrace that. But we have a team of unbelievable experienced professionals who know exactly how to do that and have been doing it incredibly successfully for years. So I'm happy to defer at the end of the day the product decision, but I'm also more than happy to consume whatever the result of that is.
And what's that pheno hunt like? Because that seems like, I guess to some, the sort of one of the most glamorous ends of the industry.
Yeah, I haven't heard it put that way. I'm glad it is. It is a pretty exciting process. I mean, for example, we were doing some back of the envelope calculations, and we found that we have easily evaluated over 10,000 different strains / phenotypes to only bring a small handful, like on the order of a few dozen, to market. And that's just what we've done today. I think a couple of years from now, we'll measure that in 100,000 plus. That's the trajectory we're on. That's what we're doing. Like, you are really, it's really interesting. I was talking with our head of cultivation yesterday as we were doing one of our, first pass pheno hunts. And he was like, you're basically playing God. Like, you are looking for the top, like, 1% of the 1% of the 1% of really special plants and genetics that you can then, kind of like artificially propagate and turn into and be able to reproduce. And it's the same thing's been happening in all agriculture by humans for not just decades, but hundreds of years. So, but it hasn't happened in cannabis. So this is what I keep saying. It's like we are so early. With the flower we see today, I do not think will represent the highest end of flower we see in the next 3 to 5 years. I think we're gonna blow the doors off of what this plant can do, the experiences it can provide. We're just at the beginning, and it's just a really exciting time, really exciting space.
I find that a very invigorating call to arms, and I just spent a moment thinking of all the cannabis I've seen that's decidedly not at the level of connected cannabis, and thinking, wow, we've already come a long way, and there's a lot to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no comment there, but yes, I'm happy for you to make your own determinations for sure.
And let's maybe step away from product and team at Connected and talk maybe a little bit more about the general marketplace. So we haven't mentioned something that's affected probably everyone listening to this podcast, which is COVID-19, Corona, and being locked inside. It was a massive change, of course, for cannabis shops to be listed as essential when so recently they were deemed illegal. What was Connected's experience of lockdown, and how have you responded, if at all, to increasing demand or different ways of consumers connecting, or even just making sure that your patients can get what they need?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly, pretty early on, kind of developed a game plan, both to keep our employees safe, as well as make sure we continue to provide access. I mean, I think some people are kind of cheeky about, not you or in this context, but about, as a result of what you were saying, cannabis going from illegal to essential. But I do think I'm very happy that it feels like the right call was made, because undeniably, for sure, many of our consumers use, maybe even the majority, use our product in some sort of medicinal fashion, whether it's, anti-anxiety, whether, or anti-PTSD, whether it's, just to be able to help better cope with and live through what has been a very challenging and tumultuous year. I know for a fact, just through feedback and talking to customers, that we've been a very, helpful source for helping people get through this period of time. If you're just home alone or with, a partner or just a friend or two or roommates and so on, cannabis is absolutely one of the best activities you can partake in, just in terms of overall mind and health benefit, and recreation across the board. I think more so than virtually any other, form of consumption and recreation you can partake in. So, again, the first concern was making sure we're operating safely. We were able to secure kind of emergency approval to switch over to both curbside pickup and kind of drive-through type models for our retail outlets, and then also just be able to continue to operate, package the product, sell it to our partner dispensaries as well. So, it's been obviously a very tumultuous time, but we were very fortunate that we were able to operate safely through that time.
And will any of those changes be permanent?
Yeah, for sure. Curbside is a fantastic way for people to come in and out, and for our retail stores to serve more traffic. So I hope so. Some of these things, the BCC, the Bureau of Cannabis Control in California, have to keep approving. So I certainly hope that we'll be able to maintain those approvals. I think some of the hesitation of approving these things before were concerns about crime, or and from our perspective, these things actually only help move traffic more quickly, and so on. So I hope we've kind of shown and proven that we can operate with curbside and those kind of models in a way that's really beneficial to the community.
And perhaps building on that, sort of with your ambitions to be very much a generational company, what can incumbent fans and perhaps new fans of Connected Cannabis look forward to in terms of projects, initiatives, and moonshoots that you guys are sort of planning over the next 2, 5, 10 years?
A lot. On that timeline, a lot. So, what I can really summarize it as, however good you think the flower is today, we're just getting started. We think we can get this plant to express itself in a larger and larger variety of interesting ways. We're going to be able to create new experiences. You're going to try strains that you're going to see strains on the market and try strains that you never before knew were possible. We're internally talking about product lines that showcase the flower in a way that has never been done before. Yeah, I generally prefer to show, not tell. So I won't go too deep, but definitely keep an eye out for new product lines. Try the new strains we're releasing, because we really, we only release new strains if they are as good or better than anything we've done before. So we keep pushing up and to the right in terms of performance and quality and all that. So definitely, encourage anyone listening to try the product and continue trying it, and see, trying the new strains as we have continued product releases. Exciting times. Sam, thank you so much for joining us on Professionally Cannabis. You've been a great guest. Thank you. Thanks. It's been an awesome conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Where do they go, the smoke rings I blow each night? Oh, what
well, listener, if you've made it till the end, thank you so much for staying with us, and thank you so much to Sam. I find it really fascinating their growth and development in the California market, and I am almost certain that they will be a company that is here to stay for the long haul. And listener, we hope you are also here to stay for the long haul. And if you are a frequent listener, or if this might be your first podcast, we would ask you to, if you enjoyed it, of course, please do like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. All of this really helps us bring more episodes into the airwaves. So we appreciate all the support and nice reviews that you're able to share with us and the other podcast apps that are out there. And as a final note and a final plug, if you are a leader in cannabis or psychedelics and you're interested in networking with your counterparts from around the world, please do join us at the GCI Summit. You are able to apply for a ticket directly on the website, and you can access this via www. I think you've always got to say the www. Even though in your taskbar it isn't actually necessary, but you can type in gcivirtualsummit.com, and yeah, we'd love to see you there. But for the time being, I'd like to say once again, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Take me above, take me